Within class, we have discussed many topics about divides between traditionalist, patriarchal, heterosexual culture within Japan and nonconforming groups and social movements which exist in contrast to it. Our group will focus on how LGBTQIA plus individuals face stigma and how this negatively affects their mental health. We will touch on depictions on how LGBTQIA plus individuals appear within media and advertisement, as well as medical and legal issues which face them, as well as how these issues being fixed will help improve the lives and mental health of LGBTQIA plus individuals living in Japan. As seen referenced in the included supplemental texts, LGBTQIA plus individuals tend to face mental health issues across the board, with 86% of the surveyed Japanese gay and bisexual young adults having attempted suicide, compared to the 29% of LGBT youth in the US. As seen by these numbers, although the problem is not unique to Japan, the problem is worse there. By improving representation within media and advertising and removing medical and legal barriers, we believe the quality of life improvement will lead to better mental health and reduced suicide rates. Proper role models are essential for the formation of a positive self-identity, and media portrayal is a key component of this. As referenced in one of the supplemental articles, many anime portray lesbians in a predatory light. Specifically mentioned is several scenes in Sailor Moon depicting the hyper-feminine Usagi to be uncomfortable around some of her butch lesbian teammates, comparable to how in the ribu movement many women were uncomfortable sleeping next to their lesbian peers. Within a newer anime in the magical girl genre, gushing over magical girls, this theme is incredibly blatant, with the main character Utena being an evil succubus dominatrix magical girl who exists solely to sexually torture the magical girl she idolizes, and one of the main supporting characters, Kiwi, being overly pushy about her attraction to Utena with the reoccurring gag of being obsessed with taking Utena to a love hotel. Additionally, gender nonconformism is often portrayed in a negative light within an anime. Once again referencing Sailor Moon, in episode 96, the character Makoto laments her tomboyish characteristics of being tall and strong as they hamper her likelihood of getting a husband and becoming a housewife. A theme more blatant in the anime Tomo-chan as a girl, which revolves around a tomboy who attempts to act more feminine to be more appealing to her crush. There are, however, good role models to be found within anime. For instance, Ryogi Shiki from the series Kara no Kyokai is an androgynous woman who is depicted as a fully capable individual, and her masculinity is not made to be an impedance in her love life. Positive role models such as Shiki being present in anime intended for younger audiences would reduce the stigma around sexual and gender nonconformism, and would likely have a positive effect on the mental health of LGBTQIA plus individuals.
My focus is on issues facing the LGBTQ rights movements in Japan. An issue facing specifically the trans movement for rights in Japan is transmedicalism. Transmedicalism is a view of trans identity that fits it in a very rigid medically diagnosed box. It is very unpopular in the global movement for trans rights. However, the majority of trans rights advocates in Japan support the GID, or gender identity disorder, model, and fear that self-ID will cause the current system to collapse. They also say that the diagnosis gives them legitimacy and that their trans existence is no longer viewed as a fetish with that diagnosis. However, there are issues with transmedicalism. The medicalization creates a very strict trans existence that does not allow any straying outside of existing lines, and anybody who does stray out of those lines does not get the care that they need. The legitimacy created by this diagnosis is not enough to protect all trans people from the discrimination they face, and trans people, regardless of diagnosis, are often told they are engaging in fetish. This medicalization can also lead to attempts to cure people of being trans, resulting in harmful conversion therapy. Another issue that LGBTQ rights movements face in Japan is public perception. LGBT issues have come a long way in Japan. They are now in the public eye and more visible. However, that comes with its pros and cons. Online harassment is very high against publicly LGBT individuals, and conservative figures in government have said that LGBT rights have gone too far. However, with the advent of online people have been able to organize protests to conservative figures saying such things, and 70% of surveyed people in Japan support stronger legal protections for LGBTQ individuals. So, my proposed solutions are as follows. Remove the GID requirement for getting access to gender-affirming care and changing the gender marker. Allow gender-affirming care to be accessed through an informed consent model. However, keep GID diagnosis as an option for anybody who is validated and fears that the informed consent model will cause issues. Conversion therapy needs to be banned. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about this. It is harmful and it needs to be banned. And protections need to be passed for LGBTQ individuals to prevent various forms of discrimination, and hate speech laws need to be passed to prevent speech harassing LGBTQ individuals in person and online.
Within Japan, marginalized LGBTQ populations are hesitant to go to hospitals despite offering affirmative care. 2 surveys show why LGBTQ people within Japan aren't comfortable with medical resources. The reason being that the government does not put any specific anti-discrimination laws for hospitals to follow, leading to widely accepted neglect of trans patients. The first survey goes over LGBTQ experiences in the medical field. 88.9% of gender identities that differ from birth answered. In the hospital, I was assigned to a room of a gender different from the one I identify as. 80% answered, it was difficult to visit departments with a strong sexual impression, such as gynecology and urology. While the free responses specifically state, when my name was called out loud, I did not like the reactions of the people around me, and it thus bothered me. The survey also had non-hetero populations that responded. 58.3% answered, my partner could not accompany me during surgery. 51.7% answered, I wanted to discuss my medical condition with my partner but could not. And in many cases, non-heterosexual partners are not allowed visitation or end-of-life care. Unfortunately, many of these problems in the system are brushed off with compulsory solutions or have just never been acknowledged in the first place. 2016 is the first academic year with the goal to explain gender formation, sexual orientation, and weights of consideration for gender identification. Despite this goal, there are still no guidelines to actual education. Until this survey was published in 2022, there had been a single report in English on LGBT education in Japan, which had low response rates and lack of comparison to other countries. There had been no major surveys on LGBTQ resources or demographics written by the government either. Our second survey details which hospitals actually taught the LGBT subject. Only 15% of schools taught the subject in clinical training, 42% did not cover the subject at all, and 37.7% reported they did not know. Despite being based on their own secluded institution, the motives for the lack of support in the medical field are inherently political. While many rules and regulations are in place to reduce prejudice, the environment itself still adheres to systematically implanted beliefs. When individuals have to be hospitalized for whatever reason, many healthcare workers may insist they self-identify for proper treatment, violating their privacy and expression. Many report personal questions asked out of curiosity and assumptions of gender still based on anatomy. Our ideal outcome is to raise educated individuals who are willing to teach LGBTQ subjects to medical students, which will allow more programs that educate the individual rather than propagate the current system's discriminatory beliefs, an environment similar to our own class and contemporary culture in Japan. In order to build an LGBTQ-friendly environment, I propose widely circulated zines and conversations within the medical field for trans resources that help faculty and trans individuals empathize with patients. This effort is similar to the ūman ribu movement for lesbian acceptance, similarly opening up trans issues just like feminist issues. This approach is not guaranteed to produce people with a genuine interest in teaching gender awareness, but we can open the door to more people who would previously never interact with LGBTQ issues, thus breaking down the political barrier that prevents hospitals from taking full advantage of the medical field and its ability to support all LGBTQ people.
On the legal side, recognition for LGBTQ+ individuals is limited in Japan. When it comes to same-sex couples, at the federal level, only heterosexual couples have legal recognition and protections. Support for same-sex marriage is mixed among politicians, with even members of the same party disagreeing on the issue. Now, some municipalities have enacted ordinances that provide recognition for same-sex couples, but these are only at the municipal level and are not legally binding and thus do not provide the same legal protections that heterosexual couples receive. And there are also concerns from some politicians that legalizing same-sex marriage will exacerbate the already declining birth rate. For transgender individuals, they are subject to very invasive requirements to change their legal gender, which include being over the age of 18 and unmarried, having no children under the age of 18, having received a diagnosis of gender identity disorder, undergoing hormone replacement therapy and sex reassignment surgery, and being sterilized so that they cannot have any more children. A landmark ruling from the Supreme Court in 2023 ruled that the sterilization requirement is unconstitutional, but the general requirement for sex reassignment surgery, as well as all the other invasive requirements, remain. The proposed legal solution within the Japanese context includes full legal recognition of same-sex couples, which includes reforming the koseki system to not require two heterosexual parents on the family registry, and to recognize children adopted by same-sex couples as the children of both parents. And to address the potential conflict with the declining birth rate, the government should provide incentives for LGBTQ plus couples wanting children to conceive via IVF or a sperm or egg donor. This also includes removing all of the invasive requirements for transgender people to change their legal gender. And with the Japanese trans community's strong emphasis on the medical aspect of their transitions and their identities, the government should provide incentives to clinics to provide gender-affirming care, which includes evaluations for gender identity disorder, as well as hormone treatment and sex reassignment surgery. And public insurance should be required to cover all gender-affirming health care and not just surgeries.